Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I have a little bit of a check-in. I haven't filmed or read too much in these past 2 months, pretty much since September, but I did want to check in, and then maybe this will help motivate me to read more and just film more, because I do really enjoy it, but just motivation's been really down lately. It's mostly just been a combination of things. I've been getting sick a little bit. I've gotten sick twice in the past 2 months, and I'm kind of recovering from that. I also don't really like doing anything when it's my time of the month either. I am the laziest, and in general, the summer months are the most unmotivational period. In general, I do not feel like doing anything when it is the summer, and I live in South Texas, so summer is really long. Some of the stuff I want to talk about have already been addressed in another reading vlog, so I will link those down below. But yeah, I only have a handful of stuff to talk about. Haven't been reading these past few months, so yeah. So the first books that I want to talk about were actually read in a YA fantasy reading vlog where I read 5 YA fantasies, talked about them. That's pretty much it. I just want to get some off my TBR, and those books were Seafire by Natalie C. Parker, Before She Ignites by Jodi Meadows, The Novice by Taran Matharu, Give the Dark My Love by Beth Revis, and The Queen's Rising by Rebecca Ross. If you want to know my thoughts on all of these books, feel free to watch that video, but I pretty much had one really surprising read and one DNF, which I don't DNF very often, so yeah, feel free to watch that if you want. I also somewhat recently read, I think this was in September, Finlay, Donovan Knocks Them Dead by Elle Cosimano. This is the second book in the Finlay Donovan mystery series. I really enjoyed the ridiculousness of the first book, and it was really easy to read, and I really enjoyed Finlay, and I forgot her friend's name, but the woman who helps take care of her kids. Really enjoyed it. The second book was a little too far-fetched at some point. It was very convenient, too convenient at times for me. I know that you can suspend your disbelief, but at some point I'm okay. I understand that our main character is a fish out of water, and she's gone into some ridiculous stuff, but at some point I'm the figures, the puzzle pieces just land perfectly for her a lot of the times, and it's just I don't know, it's not my thing. But if you're unfamiliar with this series, it got fairly popular last year. In this series, we follow a woman named Finlay Donovan, who is a single mother who's recently been separated from her husband. She has 2 children, I believe it's 2 children. And when she is having a meeting with her agent and describing the plot of her book, someone overhears her romantic suspense plot and assumes that Finlay is an actual murder for hire, and someone hires Finlay to help get rid of somebody, and that's pretty much the story. Again, it's really silly, really funny. I would love to see this into a very campy, ridiculous comedy mystery movie or something. But I gave this book 3.5 stars. Really love the first one. This one's not bad or anything, but just I had to roll my eyes in some parts. But yeah. I listened to the audiobook for They'll Never Catch Us by Jessica Goodman. Jessica Goodman is a YA mystery author. My favorite type of YA mysteries are the ones with darker tone. Subject matter can vary, but Jessica Goodman kind of is along those types of authors, like Kara Thomas, who I also really enjoy. And in this book, we follow 2 sisters who are part of the cross-country track team, and they live in a fairly wealthy type area, in the Northeast. I want to say Connecticut or something. The eldest sister is the very strict regimen type of sister, and then our younger sister is a little more carefree and stuff. And they don't really get along. You can kind of tell pretty quickly that there's a strain in this sibling relationship, which I love. Sister relationships, I love sibling relationships in general, but in what I read, I really love sister relationships and the strengths and weaknesses that they have. And they are very competitive when it comes to track. The eldest sister, track and running is the only thing on her mind, and her younger sister, while it's not her passion, it's something that she's very naturally good at. So there's a bit of competitiveness between the siblings. Early on during the school year, a new student transfers into the program. She's a very well trained like runner as well. She's gonna join the team, and both of these sisters see this new girl as a threat to their like scholarships and possible university chances. And then this young girl goes missing and no one really knows what happened to her. A lot of trigger warnings in this book. Abuse is a big one. I want to say there's mentions of like drug abuse, abortion, teen pregnancy, a lot of stuff in this one. I really enjoyed it though. It has been a while since I read it, so I don't remember quite well. It was like super predictable, but I do think that the author did keep me on my toes for the most part, and I really enjoyed it. And I gave this one 4 stars. So the next book that I read is my very first Nora Roberts. I read Naked in Death as writing as J.D. Robb. I didn't really know what to expect with Nora Roberts in general, and with this particular book, I was just looking for, I guess, like fun mystery type stuff. This book is like one of a ton of books that Nora Roberts has written in this In Death series. This takes place in like the near-ish future. In fact, the love interest of the series actually is supposed to be born next year, 2023. So that's a kind of gauge to see like when this kind of takes place. But in this book, we follow a young woman named Eve Dallas, and she's a lieutenant in the New York Police Department. She's a detective or lieutenant, I don't really know. And she gets put on this crime, or this murder happens, and she gets put on it. And one of the suspects is her love interest. And yeah, it's very like fun, suspenseful type read. A lot of trigger warnings for sexual assault, rape, that kind of stuff. While I was reading this, there was a discussion going on over on TikTok and in general when it comes to like media consumption and like the anti-intellectualism that is kind of on the rise. I've always kind of been of the mind that there are some books that I want to read for just like fun and escapism, and then there are other books that pique my critical lens and I read with a bit more like nuance, I guess. And this book in particular, I had intended to read just for like fun, thrilling suspense, romantic suspense vibes, but I couldn't help but like compare this to like my current world, I guess. A lot of things in this book kind of made me like ponder a bit. One of the big things in this book that kind of threw me for a loop a little bit was that guns are outlawed in the United States at this point. I think even police officers use some sort of like baton or some other type of weapon for their work. I think guns are only really held in like private collections or in like they're not for like personal use, which I thought was really interesting. I live in Texas, and we recently had midterm elections, and Texas reelected a fairly conservative politician. I didn't vote for him, but he's very pro-gun. This country, a good chunk of this country is very, very attached to guns in a way that I personally am not. And seeing a book where guns are outlawed, I don't know if Nora Roberts is like a political mastermind, or she probably just, has no clue because this book was written in the 90s or something. You could either look at this as like a reaction to our current time period, even though it wasn't written even remotely recently, or just like a weird coincidence. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. There's also a concept called like morality laws or a morality tax if you participate in certain businesses that we would see as illegal. Particularly prostitution is legalized here, and you pay a tax to participate in that kind of like work. A lot of interesting things in this book that I did not expect and kind of made me think a little bit, if that makes sense. And I gave this 3 stars. It's nothing like, oh my god, in terms of like the story and the mystery. I'm sure they get better or they get more different angles and stuff since this is a very long running series. But yeah, I'd continue on maybe an ebook or an audiobook. And this last book, again, I don't have much to talk about, is kind of a gem. It's not by no means like a book that no one's ever talked about, but I don't think it's incredibly popular, at least here on BookTube. And if it is, I'm not watching the right people. I don't know what every person's talking about, but that is The Cloud Roads by Martha Wells. I absolutely love this. I kind of want to reread it already. Martha Wells is the same author of the Murderbot series, which I read the first 2 novellas. I know that there's a novel out now, but I read the first 2 novellas and I liked the character work, but I didn't particularly feel super attached to the story. They were novellas, so they kind of went by quickly, right? But I wanted to see what else she had written, and I picked up this one for that part. And also, this book is also featured in the r/fantasy subreddit bingo board for the square of LGBT fantasy, and this book is one of those listed. They don't really talk about gender or sexuality, like they don't have labels like the way we do. Some of the societies in this book, and I'll explain in detail more on that. There really isn't an expectation for heteronormativity. Our main character, Moon, has mentioned past relationships with a man, and he does have a love interest, a woman love interest in this book. This book is the first in a series. This takes place in a really rich like fantasy world. We follow a character named Moon, who is a shapeshifter. He is this, well, you can kind of see him on the cover, but he kind of transforms into this winged creature, and he's never met anyone like him. He does vaguely remember having a mother and siblings, but they've passed away, and he's never met anyone like him before, even remotely closely. So he kind of travels between community to community, village to village, like looking for a place to stay. And sometimes people are kind enough to him and do open up their doors to him, and then sometimes people are not, or at some point they kick him out because, you know, they're growing suspicious of him, whatever. He understands, so he doesn't really have like a home. And then one day he meets a man who tells him what he is and that he can deliver him to a community that will accept him. There's a catch that Moon doesn't quite know about from the get-go, and he kind of gets involved in this political thing. I really adored this. I think I might have given like a 4.5, but looking back on how much fun I had, I might want to give it a 5. At some point while I was reading this, I took a pause and flipped back to see the about the author page to just see what is written about Martha Wells, and it's not surprising to me that she has a BA in anthropology, because anthropologists write some of the best fantasy books. Not that I've read like a ton of them, but Mask of Mirrors is one that kind of pops up in my head. I believe either one or both of the authors of that book are also anthropologists, and they write so richly about the world or the setting or the community that their books take place. There's a ton of like communities with their own like different cultures in this world. Now, I love something like that. I didn't have a minor in anthropology. I took a lot of cultural anthropology and a little bit of archaeology, but I love that. Maybe for readers that like a lot of excitement, they might not like this as well. I could easily see another type of reader saying like this was boring, or it needed more action, or it was too slow paced at the beginning. I love a slow paced book. I love a boring book. I love a book where others might say like nothing happened for the first 2/3 or whatever. I love that type of book, because most times the author is trying to build the world, and it might have like extra details that are not needed. I love the extra details. I love a good detailed book, and this has that. It is deceptively long. It doesn't look too long, but there is very little margins on the pages and very little word spacing and line spacing. So it was a pretty dense, culturally dense book. There's also something very fun and relaxing about reading a book where none of the characters are like humanoid, I guess. The closest thing might be Moon and his species when they're not in the winged like shape-shifting form. They are bipedal, but there's not really like humans in this book, so there's so many different types of like species of beings that we kind of meet throughout the book, and I don't know, it's just really refreshing. This book also does touch on a theme that I don't really see explored, understandably, and that is like reproduction. Like the community that Moon is entering or meeting for the first time, they have some problems with keeping the community alive reproduction wise, and I get why that might not be super popular in general fantasy, because it could easily go into like eugenics and stuff, but that's not really, don't worry about that in this book. But I recently saw a TikTok about what this theme was called. I didn't know it had a name. I think it was called Mars Needs a Venus or something. I forgot what it was called, but essentially it's like a repopulation type theme, and it comes up here. The only time I've ever read it before is like Ice Planet Barbarians, but that's a very different, that book has a very different purpose than this one. But I love both. I think I have like the 4th or the 3rd book in this series. I definitely just want to go and get books 2, 3, and 4 and like devour them, because I really enjoyed this, and I want like more people to read it. I know it's like not the newest book, it's not like the most hyped book right now, but I really want everyone to read this and like tell me what they think, because I really enjoyed like the cultural aspects of this. I gave it 4.5, but I think I'm gonna change it to a 5. So those are all the books I really wanted to quickly touch on in this video. I didn't want to like go too long between updates either, so yes, I unfortunately don't think I'll reach my Goodreads like yearly goal either, which is really unfortunate. I was so motivated at the beginning of the year, but I hate the summer. I hate heat. It makes me so lazy. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Please talk to me in the comments about anything that I've talked about. I'd like to hear anything that you have to say down below. How's your reading been going these last few months? Do you have a favorite of the year so far? I found some pretty good gems this year. I will link all my socials down below, as well as some far more important links. Feel free to like, dislike, comment, or subscribe, or do neither. It's all cool with me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.